its teaching. So let me get it in front of over here. We've done it before again, but let's briefly go through this, and then we're going to go through some more detail. So Shema Yisrael, hear Israel, Jew, listen up, understand, know. What should you know? Hashem Elokeinu, that Hashem that is transcendent, right? Hashem is, the name of God, the Tetragrammaton, Shema Vaya, Yud and Hey and Avav and Hey, that is in it, past, present, and future, past, that God is transcendent beyond time and space. Elokeinu is the name of God that is within time and space, within nature. So we need to know that God is both transcendent and eminent at the same time, which is something that doesn't exist in the human condition. But of course, God's not human. And through that, then Hashem is echad. There's oneness, whether it's a miracle beyond nature or nature itself. It's all of God, and therefore there's a oneness of God. There isn't a plurality or otherness. It's just the oneness of God. And furthermore, Shema Yisrael, that we should listen and hear is that the transcendence of God is Elokeinu. Why do we call him our God? Because he's our power. He is our power. What's our power? Hashem, transcendence. The Jew can transcend the human condition, as we do collectively, and that the fact that the Jew is still here today is a sign, a testament to the fact that we do transcend the human condition collectively, but that is because individually we are that way, hence collectively, that we transcend. That is our power. We can't allow the human condition to dictate. We are connected to the transcendence of Hashem that allows us to have the power of echad, of oneness, that there isn't otherness, there isn't me and otherness, God and otherness, there isn't other things, there's just one, there's just oneness, not things. I have a car as a thing, I have a wife as a thing, I have a child as a thing. They're not things, they're all part of the oneness in my life that transcends things, because I'm connected to a transcendent God that is not a thing. He's no thing. He's nothing. He's no thing. So likewise, I have in my life that capacity of oneness that is beyond any things. That's what I have to hear. That's the message it's got to penetrate. And there's so much more to elaborate on that, but we're going to go from there. Then this week's Parsha in VaEschanan, so it continues and says, V'ahavta, and then you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. Now, how could God command you to love him? You can't command somebody to have a feeling. You can command someone to fulfill a task, but a feeling is not a task. How does God command us? Well, it says V'ahavta, and connects to the previous, to the Shema. Once you understand with your mind and you penetrate and you get it, that Hashem Elokeinu, the transcendence and the immanence of Hashem, the power we have is one of transcendence that God gives us. There's an equanimity that we have in our lives, so a oneness in our lives, because there's not things in my life. There's only oneness of God in everything. As ultimately, then when I really get that, I will not be, and you shall love the Lord your God. You will love the Lord your God. Because through that mindfulness, through that contemplation, through that mind that absorbs that, it will come to V'ahavta, which means you shall love the Lord your God. It also means you will love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. Interesting that all your might is at the end, which means one of the explanations is with all your things, like money. It's a thing, right? Because most people, things are more important to them than anything else, even life itself. Life is not a thing. Don't think of life as things. It's not a thing in my life, like having life. No. It's life, right? It's beyond a thing. But, that's abstract, and many people are, because of the physicality of the human being and the human condition, so we're into things. We're into things. So God says, love me with all your hearts, with all your life, with all of your life, which is not a thing. But then people who things are really so important to them, love me with that too. It's even more important than their life.
Mhm.
And then you will come from there, that these things, all of a sudden things, right? And these things over here are not things anymore, really, right? But this that I command you today should be on your heart. So in other words, here it means the teachings should be on your heart. And that it's on your heart, meaning it's absorbed, not just intellectually, the idea, but it's on your heart, that it'll ruminate, it'll be a part of you. And the mitzvahs that I command you, what do you mean I command you today? God commanded us today? He doesn't command us today. He commanded us 3,333 years ago at Mount Sinai. What do you mean today? Well, in other words, the Torah teachings and the mitzvahs that I am commanding you, fulfill them like they are presented to you today. That they are fresh, they're not stale. The tefillin was not yesterday's tefillin, the same tefillin. The Torah teachings wasn't the same as last week. I learned that idea, I know that idea, I've heard that idea, and therefore it becomes stale. No, it's got to be fresh. Mitzavcha hayoim, I command you today, sense that you are connecting to God right now in this moment, anew, special. And that is when you have the proper understanding.
Rabbi, sorry, hold on 1 second.
Sure.
Sorry, Rabbi.
Not a problem. So after understanding Shema Yisrael, that'll bring you, feed to your heart, ve'ahavta, so then it'll bring you to fulfill Torah and mitzvahs in a way that it is current. It is the thing. It is today, a connection. It's fresh. It's new. I've been there, done that. But that's not enough. From there, you have to go b'shinam t'amunecha. You have to teach it to your children. Children, also to your students, it means. And then you have to speak in them, in Torah. When do you speak in Torah? Just when you have a class with the rabbi? No, when you're sitting in your house, just, hanging out, hang out, words of Torah. When you go on vacation, when you're going around, jumping from here to there, you can also have words of Torah. Well, not only when you get up, but also when you go to sleep. In other words, it's a day-long, lifelong engagement, especially when you know that you're connecting through it and it's current, it's alive, it's fresh. But that's not enough. Then you need to bring the next level. You need to bring it into a concrete reality of physical expression. Bind them as a sign on your arm and a frontlets between your eyes. In other words, you need to take all of this and it needs to be demonstrative. It can't be just a nice idea in your head and a feeling in your heart, and even words that teachings that you communicate. But communication is not sufficient. We need to now bring it into action. The world of action is expressed over here by the mitzvah of tefillin in particular, even though there's many mitzvahs like tzedakah and other things, but specifically the mitzvah of tefillin, because tefillin is connected to on the arm to the heart, connecting to the heart, and on the head, which is connecting to the mind. That the mind and the heart should be working in unison, a oneness, as we mentioned before, right, between the mind and the heart, which is a very difficult and challenging thing, to have a oneness in mind and heart, because the heart usually has layers of different desires and whims and lusts and addictions, that mind, we generally can have more of an objective, an assessment of things and of life, and seeing the truth, where the heart, it doesn't feel it. So we need to bind the two together, connect the two together, in order that there should be an echad, a oneness, that is actually real, practical in our material living, not just in the world of spirit. But then it's not enough that I have that connection to me and God through the mitzvah of tefillin that it expresses, but I have to put it on my home. I have to share that presence of God, the oneness of God, right? Indicated by a mezuzah that has this prayer of the Shema in it, indicating that the oneness of God is also part of my home, my wife, my children, and those who come to visit. And of course, as God guards us not only in our home when we have proper mezuzahs up, He guards us. So likewise, our connection to God is not just based in the home, but that is the central feature of Jewish life, is indeed in the home. So much so that if you have a synagogue, but not a mikvah in your community, and you don't have the funds to build a mikvah, you have to sell the synagogue in order to build a mikvah, because a mikvah is connected to the home, the purity of the home, purity, family purity, which is the most important thing, even greater than having a place you can come to pray. Pray, you can go in someone's basement to pray. You can go in someone's backyard, if that's make up a tent, and so on, if that's necessary, if that's the only way and means. Meaning to say that the assembly point, the meeting point of God in this world is in the family unit, and in the family units. And therefore, we have to express our connection not only in ourselves through tefillin, but then bring it into the family, and that's expressed through the concept of mezuzah. Any questions on that? Any thoughts?
No, it's great.
We've learned this before, but this was you remember this?
Yeah, of course. I remember exactly where I was when we learned it. I was in the BMW dealership.
Oh, okay. An indelible impression. Well, let's take it a step further. Okay.
Waiting 3 hours for my car.
So let's take it a step further. Okay.
But it's different every time, like you said.
Yeah, it's different every time. So now let's take Ushenantam levanecha, and you shall teach them to your sons, and speak to them when you sit in your house, and when you walk on your way, and when you lie down, and when you rise up. Let's now focus in on this. Okay, so the Rambam, based on this verse, in the laws of Torah study, in the first chapter of Torah, the laws of Torah study, in the first halacha, actually halacha 1 through 3, says the following. Do you want to read it?
Sure. A father is obligated to teach his son Torah while he is a minor, as the verse states, and you shall teach them to your sons to speak about them. Just as a person is obligated to teach his son, so too is he obligated to teach his grandson, as the verse commands, and you shall teach them to your sons and your grandsons. This charge is not confined to one's children and grandchildren alone. Rather, it is a mitzvah for each and every wise man to teach all students, even though they are not his children, as the verse states, and you shall teach them to your sons. The oral tradition explains, your sons, these are your students. A person who is not instructed by his father is obligated to arrange for his own instruction when he can understand, as the verse states, and you shall study them and take heed to perform them.
Very good. So the Rambam writes further in the laws of the mitzvah. Go ahead.
The 11th mitzvah is that we are commanded to study and to teach the wisdom of Torah. This is called Talmud Torah. The source of this commandment is God's statement, teach them to your children.
Shinantam levanecha, from the Parsha.
This commandment is repeated numerous times. Learn them, do them, so that you will learn them. This commandment is stressed and encouraged in various passages spread throughout the Talmud.
So what do we have here? In this one mitzvah, Shinantam levanecha, is twofold. The mitzvah that I have to learn, and the mitzvah that I have to teach, that are bound up in this one mitzvah, right? Mm-hmm. Which is pretty puzzling when you think about it, that each time the mitzvah is mentioned in the Torah, it's mentioned not only as me, the obligation I have to learn, but I have also to teach. And in particular, that I have to teach children, right? As it's brought down in the Code of Jewish Law. Go ahead.
There is an active mitzvah on every Jewish person to teach their son Torah. If one's parents did not teach them, they are obligated to study on their own.
So the question is, the only way I could teach my children is if I first learned, right? So seemingly, the first thing that the halacha should state is the obligation that I have to learn, to study myself. And then only then, the obligation that I have to teach. Indeed, this is the Rebbe's question. Go ahead.
It is puzzling. It would make sense to first state the overall mitzvah to learn Torah, namely personal Torah study, and only thereafter to state that is not enough to learn on your own, but you must also teach others, starting with your own child.
So why the hypersensitivity the Torah seems to stress on the teaching of children, like, and specifically younger children, right?
Yeah.
So in short, the answer is the emphasis over here in teaching the children is to frame the entire engagement of Torah study. That even when you're a mature adult, you need to, you ought to at least, study Torah the way a small child does. And what does that mean? What does that mean?
With wonder and enthusiasm and curiosity and
beautiful, exactly, and even more than together with that, rather, being a clean slate, ready to absorb it all, because it's all new and fresh.
Leave your baggage at the door.
Leave your baggage at the door. Very good. Right. Exactly. And this is exactly what it's saying here in Pirkei Avos, bringing out this idea. Thank you. Go ahead. Pirkei Avos, I think there are followers. Go ahead.
Elisha ben Abuya said, "He who learns when a child, to what is he compared? To ink written upon a new writing sheet. And he who learns when an old man, to what is he compared? To ink written on a rubbed writing sheet." Yeah.
So the metaphor seems pretty straightforward, right?
That
a child is, like a clean slate, and it'll absorb very well the ink. It'll make an indelible mark, the teachings, because the child is got this clean slate, is really curious, and is given over. Now, the question though is, what's the point of making the second comment about an old man, of ink in the rubbed out writing sheet, especially when you talk about people who only came to Judaism in their, in elderly age, no fault of theirs. They weren't raised with this.
Oh well, to say that the older student should seek to embody the learning perspective of the child.
Whoa, you are really. Wait, you didn't study this with the Rebbe already? You're way ahead. Wow. So the Medrash says, and before we get to that point that you just said, well, it's really coming to say over here that, someone who comes to it as an older age, you might think you've got a lot of writing on your parchment, right? And now you're going to write something else on it. It's not going to take. No. You have the choice. You could erase all of the folly that you have in your head, and you could now be writing something on that rubbed out sheet. It's like, you have tenants in the house that are, not good tenants. You kick them out and you clean up the place, and new tenants can come in. So don't think because the old tenants are there, you can't have new tenants come in. Just because you have old ideas doesn't mean new ideas can't enter. Torah teachings of divine wisdom, are just going to be written on old stuff. You could, if you choose, to erase or get rid of the old perspective and allow a new perspective in. So that's what the Medrash says. But the Rebbe actually takes it a step further, and exactly the point that you just said. Go ahead.
What the Mishnah means when it states, "He who learns Torah when a child," is that the person learns with a sense of humility, putting himself aside and approaching it as a child. Studying with such an approach is really the only way for the Torah to be truly absorbed. as ink on fresh parchment. By contrast, when one's approach to Torah study is based on the sum total of their own intellect and rationale, being a senior, without any humility, he cannot absorb the Torah, which is God's Torah after all.
So the key is over here, we have a choice at any time how we want to approach Torah. We could do it like the senior who is very seasoned and knowledgeable and has a lot of teachings and could be even a Torah scholar, right? And therefore, when they come to something, they've already have an attitude, they already have a perspective. They're, it's not fresh, it's not new, and they're not able to absorb it properly. They don't even get the message properly because they're just regurgitating old ideas in their head. They didn't throw out the old tenant, right? And they didn't put the baggage at the door, as you said at the beginning, right?
Yeah.
That's exactly what the Rebbe is saying. We have the choice. We could be like that child, right? That we could indeed engage in Torah study fresh, it's new. It's not, even though it's the same Shema, it's the same Shinantam Livanecha, I've learned it and learned it and learned it, but I'm always humbled by the teachings that there's more, deeper, more profound, so much more, an indelible mark that it could make on my very soul. So this is exactly why we start teaching children at such a young age, is because learning is not ultimately about the grasping of Torah, comprehending, even though, of course, you need to comprehend it. Otherwise, it's not called learning, right? It's not an intellectual endeavor in the sum total of it. That's what it would be in science and math and, and other mundane worldly knowledge. When it comes to Torah, it's really about the connection that we make to God. And yes, through the understanding, but the attitude that we have with it, that we're humbled before the divine wisdom, that we are like that child who's just thirsty for more truth of Torah, that we want to make an indelible mark on our soul, that it changes us from within. This is what defines Torah study. And that's why the mitzvah of learning Torah is defined so much about the learning of teaching the child, that every Jew should approach the Torah study as though they're that small child, brand new wisdom. This is the way to approach it.
Rabbi, when you say that the Jew has the capacity to overcome the human condition, is that something that is specific to the soul of the Jew, or it's something that stems from access to Torah?
Both things are true because of the unique Jewish soul. That Torah values and teachings are already made an indelible mark on your soul, on the DNA of your soul, right? The DNA of your soul doesn't mean, that means you're mindful of it and you live it, right? Our DNA is different than an animal, but we might act like an animal.
but as to say, if I'm a Jew and I don't even know I'm a Jew,
right? So
and I've never been exposed to anything,
Jewish,
Torah related or etc. Is my soul different from that of the gentile, such that I have a greater capacity just in the fundamentals of my composition
but remember the Torah was given to the Jewish people, it wasn't given to the other nations of the world, so it belongs to us, not just because God gave it to us, but because it is part of our DNA. It's part of our spiritual makeup. So it's part of our spiritual makeup, but like you say, you may be very distant from it, but it's still part of you. So just the famous story of the king's son who started acting like a chicken, right? Just because you act like a chicken doesn't make you a chicken. You're still human, still a person, right? So just because a Jew acts not Jewish doesn't make them not Jewish.
No, but when you're not Jewish, you know that you're Jewish.
Right.
That's why I'm taking such an extreme example where the person doesn't even know they're Jewish.
Right, but it just means as a part of them. It's just they haven't accessed that part in them.
Right. So there is an innate greater capacity.
Yes.
Independent from access to Torah and learning Torah.
Exactly. Part of our DNA, our spiritual makeup, the soul. So the Rabbi explains this in text number 9. Go ahead.
The fact that Torah education begins with even small children underscores the idea that the premise and foundation of all Torah study is not so much its intellectual wonder. Rather, it is about remaining humble and small, submitting to its author who transcends all logic. This notion of humility is not specific to the mature adult. Rather, it is the domain of everyone, even by dint of their soul, a small baby who has just started speaking. The fact that the instruction to an adult to study Torah is recorded only as part of the instruction to teach the children teaches us that even when a person is engaged in rigorous, intellectually stimulating Torah study as a mature adult, they must still retain that humility, the wonderment of a child.
Yeah.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, totally. So
that's interesting, right? Because the juxtaposition between learning and teaching, between being humble and being the instructor, that's pretty fascinating.
Yeah. And to the child, because I need to be that child.
Yeah.
In my learning, in my teaching, and ever, open, humble to and submitting to the author who's transcendent of the moment's engagement of trying to understand and get it.
I need to learn like a child so I can teach like an adult.
So, but what's the paradox, huh?
Yeah.
That the humility. So it's that humility that, and you think about it, actually, in human terms, it works. How often you speak with somebody and they're not listening. So they don't get what you're saying because they already have it worked out in their head. They don't have humility. They got it worked out. And they're not really hearing what you say.
Mm-hmm.
And forget about Torah, just in human engagement. Right? And we need to be humble. By being humble, we'll listen, we'll be silent. And we'll be able to maybe hear a truth that we didn't hear before from that person. That takes humility. That's not so simple. That's not so easy. What happens when you're when you hear the truth? What should be your response? Silence. You're faced with the truth. It's not oh, that's the truth. Truth doesn't need your tap on the back. Doesn't need it, right? You're not the bearer of truth. You heard a truth. Wow. That's like awesome. Like you're taken by it. You're quiet. You're not, you're letting it absorb. Let it be absorbed. That's the nullity, of hearing the truth. But when we are so full of us, so then, we need to embellish the truth, add to the truth, Now, sometimes, of course, you're discussing something and you have something to add and it's important, but there is a silence that a person has in order to be able to hear, to listen. And that takes a humility. That takes, taking the ideas you have and putting it aside so you can now take it.
It requires acknowledging those ideas in your head are second class to what's to be discussed.
Right. So I mean, that's specifically when it comes to the Torah.
Yeah.
Right. Now, you're hearing from somebody else something that may be just, I mean, to translate that into another manner is that, to be able to listen to somebody else and to hear them, right, and to appreciate them, doesn't mean that it's truth what they're saying. Just because someone is sharing something doesn't make it the truth, right? But there is a value in hearing so you could understand them, even if it's something that is repugnant to you, that you can at least, give them the respect in the space and to, to hear them out. So there's something to that, that's important, and to be able to do that. And that's a story. Any questions? Any thoughts? I lost you. Oh, there you go.
Sorry.
No problem. So we're good?
Yeah, my apologies.
No, it's fine. How's I think you need 2 or 3 pairs of tefillin. One at home, one in the office, and one in your car. So wherever you are, you have an opportunity to put on tefillin.
Yeah, it's not because they're not around enough that I haven't been putting them on.
I'm saying that's why I think you need 3 pairs of them.
Yeah. I'm going to put them on this weekend. It's my son's birthday. My son, Jesse, it's his first birthday tomorrow.
Oh, too bad. Hold on
So
one
I'm
second.
going to put them on. I'm going to put them on for him on Sunday.
How about today?
And today.
How about do it for God today and do it for your son on Sunday.
Done.
Hold on one second.
You're a good salesman, Rabbi.
Not so good. If I was good, then you'd be putting them on every day. Jesse is Jesse.
Yeah.
What's his Hebrew name?
Mayor.
M.
Meyer.
Just Mayor?
Yeah. Mayor Ben Amram Halevi.
Right. Okay. And when's his birthday? When was he born?
July 24, 2020.
What time?
Jesse was born in the morning. I would say about 8 a.m.
3rd of Av. His birthday was his Jewish birthday was already. And Jack, what? Hold on.
Jack is November 7, 2018. Yaakov Ben Amram Halevi.
Just Yaakov?
Yaakov, yeah.
I have this. He was born when? November
7, 2018.
7, you said?
November 7, 2018. Yeah.
What time?
Jack was also born in
the morning.
The morning. Hold on.
He's born the 29th of Cheshvan.
29th of?
Cheshvan. Cheshvan. When's Dana's birthday?
Jan 21.
Hold on one second. January 21?
1988.
88?
Yep.
She's the 2nd of Shvat.
Shvat?
Shvat. After Rosh Chodesh, this day after Rosh Chodesh Shvat.
What about me? December 12, 81.
You're the 16th of Kislev,
I think I knew that.
which is 9 days before Hanukkah, 3 days before Yutis Kislev, when the previous Rebbe was released from prison. I mean, when the Alter Rebbe was released from prison, the founder of Chabad, the Tanya author. You got? Well, I sent you Alter Rebbe, Shneizalman, the Alter Rebbe, Shneizalman,
No, but I'm saying when the previous Rebbe was released from prison, that was Gimel Tammuz?
That's the commuted from death sentence to 3 years in a harsh labor. 12th of Tammuz, he was released 9 days later. But the Gimel Tammuz, and that's when the Rebbe passed away.
Okay.
The Alter Rebbe, this is the Alter Rebbe from Tanya, right?
Yeah.
Did you get the journal that I sent you?
Yes, I did.
Did you use it in any way? You look at it?
I looked at it briefly. It's at my house. I brought it home.
I have a new journal, and I'm sending out. So I want to know if I should get you the new journal, and if you maybe with your wife you listen together to some Tanya classes.
My wife is not going to happen. Me on my own, it's always possible.
Right, but not so likely. Okay, we're gonna bother you about tefillin. I'm gonna if you're gonna have a trouble with this, then you're gonna have to buy another 1 or 2 pairs. So wherever you are, you have them. So either you want it to cost you more.
Today and Sunday.
And Monday and Tuesday.
Yeah. I'm gonna start with today and Sunday.
All right, my friend.
God bless you, Rabbi. Good Shabbos. My best to Simcha.
And when do we see you?
I'm gonna come by when I come back from California.
All right, from California. You're going this week?
No, I'm going in 2.5 weeks.
2.5 weeks.
I'm going on. No, not even. I'm going on August 5th.
Right.
So I'm going in less than 2 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, okay. We'll be in touch.
Okay, Rabbi. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Sei gesund. Bye-bye.